Aberhart here, today's host of Growing the Future podcast. We're officially on Season 3, Episode 18. Don't forget to check your YouTube channel or socials and give us a follow. You can become a podcast insider by signing up for our newsletter on our website. On this week's episode, we're going to be diving into the exciting topic of artificial intelligence in agriculture. At Precision AI, they are on a mission to accelerate artificial intelligence-based farming practices to create healthier, happier, and more profitable farms. They offer a sustainable approach to crop protection, the environment, and farmers' bottom lines. I'm super excited to have Dan McCann, CEO of Precision AI, on the podcast today. You can find Dan on LinkedIn and Twitter, or you can also visit the Precision AI website at www.precision.ai. So let's get right into it, and welcome Dan to the show. Super glad to have you on. Welcome to the show, Dan.
Thanks, Terry. Thanks for having me here. I'm excited to be on.
Awesome. So we got my sidekick Holden with us today. So welcome to the show, Holden. And we're looking forward to learning a little bit about AI and agriculture and what Precision AI is doing here right in the middle of Canada in Regina, Saskatchewan. So Dan, tell us just a little brief history about yourself and what you're doing.
Great. Yeah. Well, we're so as you mentioned, we're Precision AI, and so we've got a vision for how farming is going to look, in the next 25 years. And the farm there's been a lot of technology introduced onto the farm, but unfortunately, it's still one of the few industries in the world that has yet to benefit from all of the advancements in artificial intelligence and automation that have come in and really driven a lot of value in other industries. And I think it's the timing is perfectly right to bring those types of technologies, those types of innovations into agriculture, and really fundamentally change the way things are done. So what we do specifically is we're focused on solving the problems surrounding crop protection and the overuse of chemical pesticides. And so, as anybody knows, a part of managing your crop every year is loading up your high clearance sprayer and going out there and basically blanketing your whole field with chemicals. And what's happening is, there's a push out there to not only reduce chemicals, but also that to save money on those chemical inputs if it's possible, especially with the supply chain shortages that are happening right now. And so if you can bring artificial intelligence onto the farm and apply considerably less chemical by using AI and computer vision and things like that, there's a significant opportunity for major savings for the grower, but also a really neat sustainability story that helps improve the marketability of the crops. And so we're dedicated to bringing those technologies to the farm to make that happen.
For sure. So I think this is a fascinating topic, and it's been great working with the Precision AI team on some of the projects that we've been working on. I'd like to just take a little bit of a step back and just think about AI as a whole in our world today. And I think for a lot of us, especially in agriculture, we kind of see AI as maybe something a little bit further out in the landscape, but the reality is there's a lot of our everyday life that AI is already deeply involved that we probably are not even aware of. And just would like you to maybe comment a little bit about that and what made you interested in getting into AI and those kind of that field.
Yeah, well, it's artificial intelligence is really it's one of the newest and most exciting inventions of mankind in a lot of ways, right? It's the ability to make machines think, and some of the advantages of that are pretty staggering because especially like in agriculture is a great use case for artificial intelligence. When you're looking at it in an entire farm, right, like us as human beings, and we need to eat and we need to sleep and we need to spend time with our loved ones, we can't go and obsess about every individual plant in the field. So we have to make decisions at, kind of field levels of precision. Whereas if you can get a machine to kind of think through your field for you, that doesn't need to eat or doesn't need to sleep and can actually have the capacity to go and look at each individual plant in the field, you can start making decisions at a level of precision that is just absolutely unattainable using existing technology. So we got really excited about the opportunity to bring that on the farm and some of the unique problems that it can solve, both in terms of, crop protection, yield sustainability, optimizing yield, so on and so forth. And so it just seemed like a really, really exciting field to get into is to see how you can take these types of technologies that are in advanced other industries and bring them to agriculture. It's a very exciting time.
when I was listening to Dan talk about how you can have machines implement certain tasks, repeatability, they don't get tired, they're not complaining. I was just figuring out how we can use AI to get you to do your chores and stuff like that. But anyways, I think that yeah, what I've been learning a lot more about AI since getting involved, working on this project that we've been involved in with Precision AI and developing some of this technology. And I do think it's going to change the game, change everything around us. And there's already a lot more than we realize. And so I think, in the future, just looking a little bit ahead to the future, I think for a lot of us, or for me anyways, when I think about AI, it's like the Terminator movies, where the robots eventually decide that we're not doing things right, and decide to take over the world. And so I'm kind of curious what your thoughts are around the future of AI, and are we going to have to worry at some point that the spray drones are going to turn on us in the farm and go out of control or anything like that?
Well, just wait until AI is advanced. You talk about it not complaining, but maybe if we get really advanced AIs, maybe they will complain about being out in the field all days in the hot sun.
Yeah.
Just kidding around though. No, actually, AI is it's a buzzword that a lot of people don't really understand. But when you get deep into the tech, it's actually not very scary at all, right? Movies, as you say, like the Terminator or all these other movies out there have put these ideas in our head that it's the machines are going to take over. But really, at the end of the day, there's AI is just the ability to see patterns in huge volumes of data that we just don't have to sort through, and that's all it is, right? Like, it's nothing else. Like, we program these things to try to look at these datas and to find these patterns, and that's really what it is. So as long as we don't give it machine guns and tell it to go and try to take over the farm, then nothing's going to happen, right? It's basically just a pattern matching system. But on the other side of it too is I think people really overestimate the the capacity for what AI can do as well. Like, again, we think that it's this thing that's going to take over. But the analogy that I use is that for a human toddler, the minute that they see one or two dogs in their whole life, from that moment on, they know what a dog is. And, the best AI out there right now needs 20 million images of dogs to be able to understand what a dog is. So there's still this huge gap between, like what an artificial intelligence can actually do and what even a human toddler can do. So it's a ways away before it'll take over. But generally, I think the best part about it is just, again, this ability to equip machines with these abilities to spot patterns and things. So applying that to a farm as an example with what we're doing, some of the patterns that you can use to spot would be, looking at things like, like plant health, or, for, in our case, being able to pick out a plant species, and say, okay, well, this is thistle and this is, wild oats and this is wheat, and let's keep the wheat and let's get rid of everything else. Right. And then, so that way you don't have to spray your whole field. You can just spray just the thistle or just the wild oats and not the wheat. Right. So these types of decisions can actually come from applying artificial intelligence in the farm. And again, there's really no other way to do it other than using these types of systems that are out there.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest challenges in our business today, agriculture, and just in general, is just the amount of information that's coming at us, and it's increasing every day, every year, exponentially, and it's overwhelming. And so this is where I think things like AI can take huge amounts of information, analyze it, and start giving us reports or insights or actions that are just more calibrated and help some of these processes. I mean, there's no possible way a human could do some of the analysis on some of the work that's being done with AI, right? So I think that's where some of the benefit is.
Well, and especially when you start pairing AI with actual machines that do the work, right? It's one thing to have AI on its own, right? And it's another thing to actually pair it with machines that can do the work, right? So as an example, I think you nailed it exactly, which is just, with all this new information coming onto the farm, it's hard to know what's good or useful information and what isn't, right? So even, in our industry in drones, right? One of the advantages of using the drones is you can get a bird's eye view of your field, and you can see things you can't currently see if you've got feet on the ground. But even in that, right, you can hire a drone survey and get this beautiful image of your drone field, and at the end of the day, you get this pretty map, and you look at this pretty map and you say, okay, well, that's great information, but what the heck do I do with it, right? And that's really the challenge is sifting out the information from actionable information or things that you can actually use to materially improve your operations in the farm. And that's why we're really excited about pairing AI with robotics. So whether it's, like self-driving tractors, or whether it's, like drones that can actually, like what we're building, that can actually, create actual precision weed maps that you can load into your sprayer, or even spray directly from a drone. These types of things have a material impact on your bottom line. And this is how you can leverage AI in a way that actually improves your operations, improves your yields, improves your farm, and isn't just, like I say, just another sort of set of data coming at you that you don't really know what to do with or can't really action, right? And I think that's the key differentiator there between, AI is just a tool and AI is something that can actually materially beneficially impact your farming operation.
Yeah, so I think a little bit later in the episode, we're gonna talk a little bit about your entrepreneurial journey. But for now, I know you started your entrepreneurial journey not in the agriculture field, and you started Precision AI to enter the agricultural field and the opportunity there. And why don't you just share with us a little bit about why you chose to start the company and focus on leveraging AI in agriculture versus, what you could have done in any other industry or what you were doing before?
Yeah, so great question, Terry. Thank you. So I actually kind of got into precision AI by accident. I had at my previous company, I'd started another company. I've been kind of a serial entrepreneur for a while, and I was in the fintech space. So unfortunately, long before fintech is hot, it's now the hot new industry. And when I was in there, it certainly wasn't. So there's that for timing, but. I had somebody who was working for me who went off and got his doctorate for artificial intelligence, and we got along quite well, and we're always looking for a project to develop together. And at the time I was running my fintech company, and so we were looking for different ideas, and one of the things that happened is me being a serial entrepreneur and being kind of like one of those sort of type A personalities that's always doing something, right? I can't sit still. I used to renovate houses. I used to play guitar in a band, right? I've got a garage full of junk, and and my wife wasn't able to pull her vehicle in the harsh Saskatchewan winters, wasn't able to pull her vehicle into the garage because it was full of my junk, and so eventually she got so frustrated with this, she sort of said, okay, we'll get rid of this stuff or I'm going to get rid of you. So I said, okay, message taken. But I was too busy to, because this was years ago before the smartphone, like things like Garage Sale and were around. At that time, you still had to like take a picture of it and then like upload it to like Kijiji and like write your listing and research to figure out what these things are worth. And like, I mean, it was a painful process, and I just didn't have time for that. So I went and I phoned up this friend of mine and I said, look, here's the idea. What if you could walk around in your garage with a smartphone and snap a picture of something, and it'll use AI to like figure out what it is and then go and like scrape an existing listing off of eBay, because probably everything has already been listed on eBay at some point in the time, so it'll just match it and like write the listing for you. And we're like, hey, actually that sounds like a pretty good idea. So we raised a little seed capital and built a proof of concept of that system, and it actually worked awesome for certain applications and not very well for other applications, because we found there's a lot of stuff out there. Like if you're looking at a bike, right, they look pretty distinct and you can pick that out and that works really well. But if you're looking at something like a DVD player, right, like a lot of these things look the same and it's actually hard for the AI to actually accurately identify what it is. So we looked at this and we're like, yeah, we can maybe solve this problem, but it's going to take us a lot of time. But the testing, right, we had a plant in the office, and every time we'd test this, we'd test it against this plant that just was sort of by our desk, and we figured out very quickly that it was kind of elite at detecting plants, like it never got them wrong. And so we said, well, wait a second, here we are and sitting in one of the largest agricultural centers in the world. You can't throw a stone without, either hitting a producer or somebody who came from a farming background. We've got this thing that's elite at detecting plants, like maybe there's an ag application for this. So my family all came from a farm. I wasn't on the farm. I was raised in the city, and ironically, at the time when I was younger, I didn't. I actually didn't enjoy going out to the farm. I just wanted to play with my technology all the time, and so my family all laughed at me that now that we're now back in ag tech, things have come full circle, and they're out back on the farm again, and I'm actually loving it now. I think it's fantastic. Anyways, so we, so this idea popped into our head saying, okay, well, if we can differentiate, if we can identify plant species, then we can probably pick out in a field what's weed and what's crop, right? And if you can only spray the weeds and not the crop, like how much chemical would you actually save? So the first thing I did is talk to my family, and then I phoned up a bunch of my producer partners or friends, and I said, hey, look, here's the idea. If we can, use AI in the field to spray only the weeds and nothing else, how much would you save, and would you buy that? And without fail, like 100% of them are like, do you know how much I spend in crop inputs every year in chemical? Like, do you know how much that would save me? And I'm like, yeah, okay, I guess we got something here. So, so we ended up, figuring out how to adapt it to AI in the field with a lot of different things, and thus began Precision AI.
Yeah, that's an incredible story, and it's just I've always fascinated when I hear that. So tell us a little bit. I mean, you've led into some of what Precision AI is doing through the conversation so far, but let's just get the kind of the company pitch, the overview. What is Precision AI all about, and what are you hoping to achieve?
Yeah, so Precision AI pairs artificial intelligence and drones actually to be able to dramatically reduce the crop chemical inputs that you use in your field. So what we do is we've got sort of one brain and two bodies, we call it. So the brain is a computer vision system that actually is in the drone itself. So as it's flying over your field, it can actually see and understand every single plant in that field and understand what species it is. So if it sees something that's supposed to be there, like wheat or canola, it just leaves it alone. If it sees something that's not supposed to be there, like kochia or wild oats or or thistle, it can actually tag that that plant and actually create a map that you can load into your sprayer that will actually leave all of your nozzles off unless it happens to be going over one of these weeds. So instead of having 60 nozzles on all the time while you're going over your field, you might have 59 of those nozzles off and only one nozzle on as it's going over the weeds. So it's a dramatic reduction in chemical crop inputs. And the second thing that we're actually building right now is to do the actual spraying from the drone itself. So if you can imagine a fleet of drones, right? Let's say 5 or 6 drones, flying over your field at high speed and precision dosing just the weeds as it flies over them, kind of like a spot sprayer. It's really a game changer in a lot of ways, because not only can you go faster than any ground sprayer ever would, but you can actually spray in crop without any kind of damage, without any compaction issues. You can spot spray areas that may have grown in later. It's a really, really new way of thinking about crop protection in a way that's just a dramatic input in chemical, or a dramatic reduction in chemical input costs for the farmer without sacrificing any yield. So it's a game changer in our opinion.
Yeah, for sure. So we've been working along with Precision AI as Sure Growth and Aberhart Farms, helping to develop some of this technology. And one thing that kind of became clear to me was that essentially all of our spray systems in the past, and our spraying methods, were built and designed for maximum coverage. Overlapping nozzles and big wide, like just paint it with a huge wide brush, right? And now we're trying to be more precise, which is needed for a lot of reasons, for the savings, for the environment, for the consumer demands, all these different kind of things. And so it's been interesting that now we're trying to look at pinpoint accuracy, because we have the ability and the technology to be able to do that. And I think in the coming years, it's totally going to kind of flip how even we see sprayers are designed. We're starting to see sprayers come out of Europe that have 10-inch nozzle spacing instead of 15 or 20, right? And I can see with this type of technology, we might consider different angle of nozzles so that there is no overlap, so we can get more targeted, because we can control each nozzle individually, and those kind of things. So
Yep, absolutely. And I think that's only going to become right if you're buying any kind of new sprayer these days, almost all of them have PWM on them, or or they are going to get tighter nozzle spacing and faster reaction times and so on and so forth. So right now you really can't make use of that technology very efficiently right now. I mean, you can do it for edge control and turning and a few other things, but it's not it's not the level of benefit that you get if you can pair that with a system that can actually, like I say, just leave all the nozzles off unless a weed has to be in the vicinity, because it's you may only have 10 nozzles on at a time out of 60 or 30 or however many you're going to have on there. And that's a game changer, right? I mean, it's the way to, and it's not just about savings. I mean, the savings are fairly significant. Like a lot of people don't know that about 80% of what you spray from a traditional sprayer is actually wasted. I mean, unless you're doing like a pre-emergent or something like that, but if you're doing like an in crop, about 80% of that just hits the dirt and does absolutely nothing. And so you're basically pouring tens of thousands of your own dollars on the field every year, right? With no benefits, and we can reclaim that cost. But in addition to that, you've got the whole sustainability side of the world, and for a lot of people who understand the direction ag is going, customers are getting a lot more nervous about what they put inside their bodies, and in a lot of cases the science doesn't really matter. It's just kind of how people feel about this stuff, and if there's a consumer drive for sustainably grown commodities or lower pesticide type of commodities, that's what the downstream grain buyers are going to be demanding, and that's what producers are going to have to adapt their practices to be able to deliver these types of commodities. So technologies like ours, we think, are going to be inevitable as part of the farm of the future. It's just the savings are too much, and the sustainability drive that's coming downstream is just too much. It's the perfect storm of both, and this idea of blitzing everything with chemical is it has to change. It's too inefficient.
Yeah, that's a good term. Blitzing the whole field with chemical. We've got a term we use once in a while, coined from Elson Solberg, about carpet bombing the field, and that's kind of what we're doing. So we were talking about this other day. Obviously, the savings and efficiency is one of the huge draws, right, amongst many of the other benefits, right. At the same time, in today's current environment, that savings potential or value just probably doubled with what's going on with supply chain and input values and things like that. And I've always said that when it comes to precision technologies, any kind of precision technologies, the value exponentially increases as the value of those input costs go up. I mean, when nitrogen was 20 cents a pound, saving a few pounds here and there, redistributing where you put it on the field, may not be super significant, but when it's $1 a pound, it's a big deal, right? And so same thing with even something as simple as glyphosate is getting to be more of a significant cost now. So that it creates more opportunity for the value of this type of technology.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, very much so. I think it's. I think you nailed it, Terry. I think it's just. It's the convergence of just so many different things, and that's an absolutely excellent point. Which is as supply chains get tight, and we've always had to deal with this a little bit, but these past years, it's really the fragility of the systems that we use. For this type of stuff is challenging, and again, bringing layers of technology onto these types of things can allow us to be a lot more resilient against these types of supply chain issues, and the highly variable cost structures that can go with these types of things. Just to put things in perspective, right? I think it was last year or the year before? I think dicamba suddenly just out of nowhere got prohibited. Right, and there's people with like sheds full of this stuff, and now you're not actually allowed to apply it to your field anymore. And so it's like, okay, well, what do we do with this now? So there's like the flip side of that too, where if you stock too much of it, and all of a sudden regulations change because of, again, whatever reason is out there, they just do. Then you may be in a situation where you've got this huge investment that you can't realize a return for. And on the other side, if you kind of do more of a just in time, I'm going to order this every year type of approach, approach, then if there is a supply chain issue, then you're paying, top dollar if you can get it at all. And again, that's all the more need for these types of efficiency gaining technologies, right? Like if you have our technology on your farm, and you can dramatically reduce those chemical inputs, all of a sudden your impact, your cost basis of the impact of one way or the other is minimized to like 10% of what it would be, right? So, I mean, it really stabilizes and normalizes those farming operations.
Well, and with anything with new technology, there's always that initial kind of barriers to adoption. And I think about even back to the early days of GPS. We bought one of the first light bars that went on to a sprayer. It was $20,000 for a WAS signal and a little light bar on your window. And that was pretty groundbreaking. When you first start working with this stuff, it's quite expensive and you don't really know how to use it, and it's cumbersome and nobody likes change. And then once the operators run with it for a couple of weeks, if it goes down, it's like they don't know how to run the machine. You can't spray the field without your GPS working. And so it quickly becomes, that how could you couldn't imagine how you used to do it kind of thing, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. It's going to be, this idea of using AI on a farm is going to be table stakes, in the next 10 years, right? Today it's new and it's different, but in 10 years, the sprayers that you buy or the farm equipment that you buy, this is all going to be on there. And I think to draw back to your previous point about, like all the information that's coming and all the data that's coming, I think that it's really important to understand, how to actually, maximize or extract the value once you are going to see this type of technology on the field all the time. And I think the smart vendors are going to be the ones that realize that it always needs to have a very easy to understand ROI that's going to be, like kind of hit you in the face. And I think the ones that'll be less valuable will be the ones that might give you some marginal insight, but it's not necessarily going to be a total operational game changer, right? So I think it has the chance to do both. And I think that, again, the ones that pair it with robotics or pair it with drones or pair it with something that can actually materially save you money or make you more money are going to be the ones that win in the end.
Well, let's face it, as you alluded to earlier, like it right or wrong, the big push from consumer is around sustainability and chemical use. Whether some of that is justified or not is another debate or podcast probably, but we're going to look back when we start implementing, and we're just on the cusp of these types of technologies being implemented into the industry. And once we're actively using them, we're going to look back at the way we applied chemicals in the past and think like, I can't believe we did it that way. Just like we can't believe, we used to have ads that smoking was healthy for you, kind of thing. Right.
Totally, I know I completely agree. Yeah, so smoking was healthy, or that pregnant. I remember seeing one that pregnant women should drink beer because the hops are good for the baby, right? Like it's kind of like, okay.
Yeah, we've had the pleasure of seeing some of the demos of this technology in the fields and the drones ripping around on a couple of the field days, and some demos of the technology in a research plot here at the farm. And I'm curious, Holden, you've been at a couple of the field days there, and what was your first impressions when you've seen this technology, thinking about potentially being a future farmer?
Well, seeing the drone like fly over the field and mapping out the plants and knowing the difference between the crop and the weed was really cool to me, because seeing how fast it could do it and seeing how much it can like track between the different sizes, and like if there's a really small weed or a really big weed, and how it can just tell the difference. I think that'll really help in the future, because some farmers don't even know the difference. Like I didn't even know that, but this drone can, and it does it so quick.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, no, appreciate that. The one thing that that always there's two things that always come up, especially when you're talking about drones and agriculture. So most drones out there are designed to fly at something like, I don't know, 100 to 400 feet above the field and take these bird's eye views of the field, but they never really get enough precision or enough resolution to look and be able to identify what plants or what species, and especially if you're talking about like two leaf or smaller, right, where you've got plants that are like potentially even the size of a nickel, right? These types of things you just can't see from those types of drones, and so when we had to do it, we had to figure out how to be able to see like see down to the millimeter level of resolution, so that you can actually make out what species the plants are, and especially when you're dealing with like really hard problems, like wild oat identification and stuff like that. That type of stuff, you really need a great amount of visibility and resolution to be able to pick out that species, right? So for a human being, it's pretty tough to differentiate between something like wheat and something like wild oats. But a computer can actually do it if you're looking in the right spectra, but you need a lot of resolution for that. So that's one problem we had to solve. And then the next problem we had to solve was also, how do you do it fast enough? Because you can do anything precise enough if you can go slow, but if you've got 5,000 acres to cover, you don't have a month to get this thing done. So how do you engineer something that can also go fast enough to tackle the broad acre size of Canadian farms? And that's those are two massive challenges that we had to solve coming into this. But when you see the end result, it's pretty cool. Like you can actually you can see these drones ripping over a field at very, very high speeds, and and your mind starts wandering to, well, hey, like, cool, this is super cool. Like if you can spray at that speed too, how fast could you get the job done? And that's one thing that we're working towards. If we can spray at 70 kilometers an hour, I mean, you can get the job done 2 to 3 times faster than you can with your ground rig. And so that's something that we're really working towards right now.
So another question I had was, what like weather would affect the drone, or like can it go in the rain if it's super windy? Like what is all about that?
Yeah, well, you know what, that's a great question too. The wind does affect it, but that's also the same thing. It's about the same as you would get with your ground sprayer, right? You're not going to spray with your ground sprayer in 40 kilometers an hour winds, and you wouldn't do the same thing with a drone either, right? So in those types of challenges obviously exist on prairie farms where the winds can be highly variable, but it's no worse than what you're doing today. But the rain obviously is something else too. Like there's an advantage and a disadvantage. The advantage is that you probably shouldn't be flying drones in the rain, right? That's not not terribly safe. But on the other side of it, which is the good side of it, is that after a rain, where you couldn't get your ground sprayer in because maybe your field is too wet, well, a drone can actually fly over that because it's not on the ground, right? So what you lose in not being able to fly in the rain, you gain in the fact that you can actually treat, when your field is wet. So especially if you've had a really big soak and your field isn't going to dry out for a few days, the drone sprayer is actually a much better way to get the job done.
Yeah, I think one of the things that is really interesting when we think about moving to autonomy and using these types of technologies. I was part of a peer group or feedback group with the DOT platform at one point in time, and what we talked about there is some of the things that we're most excited about is just the fact of getting some time back in your life, and the safety side of things and automation. So with spraying, a lot of times where we are dealing with the environment or wind or different things, and having the potential in the future to have that machine kind of on standby, waiting for the weather parameters to be right, and it can start going at any time and it can shut down again. The last few years, we've experienced a lot of wind in the prairies, maybe a little bit more than normal, and so we're trying to go out in the evenings and early in the morning, and you're not really sure when exactly the wind's going to slow down. And so I think that's one of the things that we forget about, or don't always think about, the benefits of having a machine that's making decisions. Like sometimes that's not always a good thing, but most times it is, making a decision based on facts and data versus emotion, which, let's face it, there's still a lot of decisions that farmers are making based off of emotion.
Yep. Yeah, very much so, and I think that's the on a number of levels that's really where AI and autonomy on the farm is going to come in, right? Especially if you've got a larger operation and you look to bring in labor during those other seasons. I mean, things like COVID have taught us that even the labor chain isn't always it's sometimes it can be difficult finding people anyways, but when you can't import people like a lot of operations do, the timings of everything you do becomes even more critical. It becomes even a lot harder. So these types of things can become challenging, and so the nice part about the autonomous AI powered drones is that whether it's drones or whether it's something else, when you bring AI into the field and you pair it with a robot that can work 24/7, you don't really have to worry about that so much, right? Because it's as an example, your drone platform can sit there and wait. And, once that wind dies down, it can go and survey your field for you. You don't really have to be the person that's, sitting behind the cab or doing all that other type of stuff, right? It can go and kind of get the job done in the evenings, in the mornings, at night. There's just a lot of real efficiency gains that can come from these types of autonomous systems that, again, you don't get right now, right? Like, imagine being able to have a fully 24-hour operation, but not having to staff it up with, a bunch of people who you've got to pay for to work 24 hours a day, right? Like, that's one of the main benefits of these types of solutions that are coming out.
Well, when you can target where things are actually needed, it creates more efficiency. And I think one of the challenges just with larger farms and larger acres is just how do you get it over it all? How do you get what's in your brain or your thought and knowledge over all those acres? And by having these types of systems, you may still have to kind of check or verify or ground truth, but you may only have to go to 10 or 20% of the fields and areas in the fields if you have the right data to help make that decision. And it just allows us to leverage that knowledge on a much broader scale with much more accuracy.
Yeah, I agree.
So one thing that I'm curious about is there's a lot of companies in the green on green spraying space right now. There's everyone probably knows the story of Blue River and John Deere, and there's Bosch and Exarvio and all these. There's lots of people out there in this space. What makes precision AI unique or different? What's their special sauce? What have you done to set yourself apart from the rest out there?
Yeah, well, the main thing that we're doing is that all the other solutions that are trying to be out there now, whether it's you've got these solutions like Weed It, which are or like the Green Seekers, which are in one category, but those are really only beneficial for pre-emergent, because all they do is they pick out kind of green things, right? They look for chlorophyll. And if they see chlorophyll, they'll spray it. And for a pre-emergent, that's actually quite valuable. But your cheapest chemical costs are also your pre-emergents, right? When you're doing your initial burn downs and stuff like that. And then once the crop starts growing, and you can't use those systems anymore, or at least their benefits drop dramatically after that. So it's a pretty expensive retrofit to your sprayer for your kind of least impactful spraying operation in a lot of ways. I guess you can use it at the end of the season as well too, but so then what some of the other companies are doing, like the Bosch Arvio or the Green Eyes and the Bilberries of the world, they're doing like a green on green type of system. And for those of you who don't know what that means that you're actually capable of differentiating between the species of plants, so you can spray only the weeds and sort of leave the crop alone. But again, you've got there's a lot of challenges with that system, with those systems, because in order to do that, you need to put a whole pile of expensive cameras and computers on your sprayer, and they usually end up costing somewhere in the neighborhoods of $150,000 to $200,000, and often that's American costs to retrofit these things on there. To put on your systems. And then of course you've got a whole pile of issues with the accuracy, because the part of the problem with these is the technology itself is being worked on, but it's not been perfected yet. And so as an example, one of the things is you've got when your boom arms are bouncing, right, as every boom arm does, that sort of that confuses the computers and confuses the the systems that are on there as their focus changes and as everything's sort of moving around and shaking, and you end up with accuracy problems. And so even though the accuracy can be pretty good, you still wind up with a bit of a problem. So let's say they claim like 95% accuracy, which is a really good number in the AI world. Well, that means you're still leaving like 5 out of every 100 weeds potentially on the field, and over the course of a whole field, that's like a major problem, right? So what we're doing is we're taking a different approach, right? So instead of having to make that capital investment, we're actually putting it on a drone, and then you can just sort of do it as a service or as a survey. And then because of that, you don't need to put 30 cameras on your boom arms and then have all the maintenance risk and cost risk associated with that. And then actually, sort of the last thing I want to mention on that too is there's also some residual asset value concerns. And the reason for that is, let's say you're going to put a $200,000 retrofit in your sprayer to add these types of systems to be able to save chemical by spraying only the weeds and crop. Okay, well, that's all well and good, but technology changes so fast that, in your 3-year cycle, when you're looking to trade that sprayer, and there's probably a new version out already. So now you're trading in a sprayer with old tech, and you might not actually get your investment back out of it. So there's a lot of risk and a lot of frustration and a lot of challenges with, the existing ways people are approaching the problem. So that's why we went the method of putting it on a drone and saying, look, instead of having to make this investment, just pay somebody to come out and fly your field with a drone right before you spray, and then we can give you a weed map. And then you can just use your existing sprayer, and you don't need to put all those cameras on it, and you don't have the maintenance problems with it. It's a fundamental different way of approaching the problem, and it's a lot more cost effective, a lot less risky, and especially when we get to the point where we can actually do the drone spraying. That's again where I think it's a real game changer, because at that time, we can go faster than any ground sprayer ever could, right? You cap out at 30 kilometers an hour in a ground sprayer, but if like a crop duster type of scenario, right, it can go a lot faster and get the job done. And so that's hopefully where we hope to get to, using a system of drone sprayers where we could maybe get the job done even faster than a ground sprayer ever could, no matter how much technology you put on it. And so that's what we're working towards.
Yeah, it's super exciting. It's super exciting to think and see of what's being done here, right in the prairies. We've always been known for leaders in innovation in agriculture with production and farming equipment, seeding equipment. Saskatchewan's especially famous for a lot of great seed manufacturers and other equipment manufacturers that have been all over the world. And it's really cool to think that this type of transformational technology that is going to be implemented on a global scale is being grown and developed right here in Saskatchewan. That's pretty exciting to me.
Yeah, well, we're excited to be here in Saskatchewan. I mean, it's it's a fantastic place to develop stuff like this, because we've seen the response from the producer community to be really, really supportive. Everybody's seems to really want to be helpful here, and I think it's part of our culture, right? Everybody wants to help. Producers such as yourself, Terry, who are invaluable to helping us create and shape these types of products to make them actually work on farms. Really, really excited and happy that you've helped us on this project, because it's really it's made a huge difference just being able to work with somebody like yourself. So thank you.
Yeah, no, it's exciting to see, and as we learn more about it as well, you start, obviously, as there's challenges in any new technology to get to market and get where you want to go, but it's also been super exciting to see the opportunity that lies there and where we're going. One of the things that I've always been really intrigued in working with you, Dan, since we met, I think you have a really interesting entrepreneurial mindset, as you mentioned earlier, a bit of a serial entrepreneur. And what I've seen is you've done a really great job of building an incredible team and having the vision for the company and Precision AI. And so I'd like to, this podcast is a little bit about the entrepreneurial journey and mindsets and experiences. So just share a little bit about your entrepreneurial journey. I know you've gone through kind of a startup to exit and things like that. Just share a little bit about your entrepreneurial journey and why you started doing what you do.
Well, I've always been, I think to be an entrepreneur, you have to be wired a certain way. And I've always been wired that way. I had my early, like while I was in college and shortly thereafter, I kind of had my, government IT job, and I was dying a slow death just because I think when you're wired to look for big problems to solve and sort of have the both the guts and the stupidity or foolishness to actually go and try to do them, tough working regular 9 to 5 job. So I've always been wired that way, but I always needed to kind of, my problem is that I tend to look for really, really big problems to solve, right? It's a blessing and a curse, and probably more curse than blessing, because I end up sort of diving headfirst into things where the difficulty level is like a 9.5 out of 10 usually. But in my first company, I saw an opportunity in the fintech space. I remember I was working at my government job, and I looked down at my computer, and I was always just hunkering for the right idea to just dive after. And this is in like 2005 or 6, like a long time ago. Before the smartphones, there was no iPhones or anything else. Like the BlackBerry was just coming out basically at that time. Not even, right? It was that was still like bleeding edge, and I remember looking down at my computer, and I remember reading this story about, online commerce and some huge credit card fraud that had happened where like 500 million credit card numbers were stolen. And I remember thinking to myself, well, this is kind of stupid, right? You walk into your grocery store and you walk into your bank and you go and you swipe your card, and there are, all these stuff attached to computers, and, you can protect the transaction that way. So why is everybody just, like keying in credit card numbers and like having them stolen? And like, why can't you just buy a laptop or buy a keyboard and actually have like a credit card reader in, so when you're shopping online you could just like swipe your card like you do in a store, and then it's just secure and done? And it was just like, okay, well, that seems too obvious. There's got to be a reason that hasn't been done before, and sure enough there was. But long and short of it is we ended up spinning up a company to do that, and then and then very quickly, sort of shortly after we got the company off the ground, the smartphone revolution came in, and we quickly realized that was really where the the opportunity was to do financial transactions on a smartphone. So we ended up kind of pivoting slightly to that. It was just an easier opportunity, and so I kind of built that company, and then went through the 2008 financial crisis, and then almost did the typical thing where you come within weeks of payroll, and you're stressed to the nines, and things are looking grim, right? And then you kind of turn it around a little bit and stay the course and fight through it, and eventually turn it into something, and so it's but lots of long hours, lots of stress, but wouldn't change it for the world. So, and then after that, saw lots of other opportunities, but this one, and, with agriculture, I just think is just such a great opportunity, because again, it's one of the few industries in the world where, you've got, there's so much expense and so much money changing hands, and the operations are so mission critical, and it's just, things are still done the way that they're done. Whether you've got a horse and oxen that was pulling your plow, or whether you've got a tractor with air conditioning and auto steer, it's still kind of the same thing, right? You still got to be there to do the job, right? But it's things can change though. Like, why not have a self-driving tractor? Why not have like AI that can actually determine like fields to spray, and even like thinking way further ahead into the future. Like, once you start rethinking the problem from the perspective of like artificial intelligence and per plant decisions, like even how you seed your fields might change, right? Like, because right now we seed them in rows so that we can get our big machines through there, but maybe that's not the best way to get the maximum yield out of your field. Maybe if you can start doing stuff with machines and do stuff with the air, you can plant in a different way that can actually squeeze 10 to 20% more yield out of your field. So these types of things are coming down the pike, and sort of being part of that narrative, and part of that transition between like the old world methods and like what's coming next is so exciting for me. I just love the industry. I love the people in the industry, and I'm just so excited for what can come.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think there's, for every entrepreneur or startup business there's a difference. There's probably a significant difference between, starting something and growing it, and running a startup where you have to actively, raise investment money, and then, looking to exit at some point in time. And I know you've been through that. I'm curious to learn a little bit about what you think is you need to know or do in order to successfully raise money and have people believe in your cause and your mission, and maybe grow something to an exit like you've done before in the past. I think that's something that not every entrepreneur has gone through or experienced.
Yeah, well, great question, Terry. There's a couple of different ways you can build a business, and one is just bootstrapping it, which is just kind of like hard work, and living minimally, and reinvesting your resources into building slowly and getting customers and growing, right? Like, that's how a lot of people do it, and that's that's it's one of the hardest ways to do it, but it's also one of the most rewarding ways to do it. And the other way is to come up with the scalable idea that you couldn't possibly hope to finance on your own, and then raise some investor capital to go and make it happen. And there's interesting aspects of both. Really, if you're, I think if you, at least for me, the most exciting ones are those ones, right? Everybody's wired differently, but those are the ones like, thinking big and thinking global and thinking scalable, and then thinking about how you have to finance it and how you have to put it all together. And so the way to approach that, at least in my experience, is you've got to sort of have three core things. So first of all, your idea has to be able to scale. If you're going to raise investor capital, it can't really be a small business. You have to think of, how it's going to, work in your city, your province, your country, and then globally, that type of stuff. And then the second thing is you have to be able to tell a really good story. You have to be able to share your vision and articulate your vision very clearly, very comprehensively, and with a mastery of the area that you're in. Because if you can't, there's an old saying, I forget who said it, but somebody said, if you can't explain something simply, I think it's Albert Einstein. He said, if you can't explain something simply, you don't know it well enough. Right. And I think that that's one of the greatest challenges in fundraising and in trying to convince investors to come in, is to make sure that you can not just have your idea, but you can say it in 60 seconds or less and really articulate why you're excited about it and why they should be excited about it. So that's, sort of like the next thing. And then the third thing is you got to be surrounded by a great team. Nobody is going to be able to raise any investor funds if you don't have a great team around you, because everybody knows that there's no single person that's an island and you can't do it all yourself. And so the great investors invest in people, not ideas, in a lot of cases, right? You have to be able to be trustworthy, and you have to have a team around you that knows that they can just execute and won't rest until the company's successful. And if you have those three things together, I think you can be really well positioned to go and raise some investor dollars and to take a shot at that, making those ideas work. But it's going to be hard. It's not an easy. You have to be able to deal with rejection, right? There's no business out there that goes and pitches an investor and gets all their investment that they want right away. You got to get rejected 20 times for every one person who says yes, and that's just the nature of the game, right? So you got to.
Yeah, that's interesting, and lots of good Cole's notes in those comments there, Dan. So you've been around the gamut a bit. You've done a few things. You've had some success. You've got a few scars on your back, probably too, like most of us. What are just some of your kind of golden rules or keys to success in business and entrepreneurship and life, I guess?
Oh, goodness. Well, integrity, I think, is probably the best one, right? It's you really have to be, the best, sort of the best thing to say is if always do what you say you're going to do, right? And that's, both in terms of, like the ethics in which you operate, but also in terms of like knowing your own limits and making sure you operate within them. Because there's an old saying that, under promise and over deliver. And I think that's a mantra in life in a lot of ways, but especially in entrepreneurialism. Some of the tendencies, at least I have them, and I'm sure we all do sometimes, is we get over our skis a bit. We get too excited and drink our own Kool-Aid sometimes, and then wind up painting ourselves into corners that we really can't get out of. So understanding how to really do what you say you're going to do, act with integrity, and know what to say no to, because it's not always what you do. Sometimes it's what you don't do that also helps you be successful. So these are a lot of a lot of lessons that I learned. It's along the way that sometimes I've seen people, like there's the old story about sort of the entrepreneurs out there who come in and promise a whole pile of stuff to either their customers or to their investors and then don't deliver on it. And that to me is one of the most dangerous things you can do. You just have to be really careful and really honest. And actually, ironically, what I find is if you surround yourself with really great people, the more honest you are about where you're at, like people love to help you, right? Like we're creatures that like to help each other out. So instead of coming in and saying, I can do this, it could be like, like I'd like to do this, but Terry, I need your help. Like, like I can't make this thing work unless you're helping me here. Right. And, guys like Terry who are good dudes are going to be like, sure, I'd love to help you out. And that's how you be successful.
Yeah, I think that's really cool. And one of the things that we've probably got along with pretty well right from the start is I think we had fairly similar mindsets in alignment around how we want to do business. And And we've had these conversations with some other mentors that I've worked with, or people in that I highly respect, about you kind of eventually get to a point in life and business where you've probably had a few battle wounds and good and bad experiences, but you kind of get to the point where you want to and can choose to work with the people that you want to, and share kind of like-minded views and values, and that's a pretty powerful thing, and also a great place to be, because when you can do that, you can usually create a lot of success together.
Absolutely. I think the win-wins and the, choosing people you want to be around, right? Like if you're going to spend so much, if you go down the entrepreneurial path, you're going to spend so much of your life trying to make your business succeed. And that needs other people. And if you're surrounded with people you don't like being around or you don't like working with, it will become intolerable, right? So you have to choose people who are just really great and really aligned. And like I say, share your same core values, because that's where it starts, right? It starts at the same core values, and it starts at being aligned on that. And then just look for win-wins, right? Like look for symmetry in the relationship and win-wins, right? Like how do you, like if I'm going to win, how does Terry win? If Terry's going to win, how do I win? And in those types of things, then you've got everybody pulling in the same direction. And that's the path to success. The minute you start straying from that path is the minute you get into trouble. So.
Yeah, it's been great watching you and learning and seeing how you've built the company and added all the people to the team, and trying to charge ahead. And it's a bit of a pressure cooking environment at times, right? Because you're trying to reach your goals, you're trying to meet investor expectations and find more, and there's always bumps along the way, right? So it's been really interesting to watch, and it's been inspiring to see your leadership and your vision. You do have a really strong vision and clear vision, as you talked about, as being key, and just seeing how you're surrounding yourself with the right people. So.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Well, and likewise as well.
Yeah, thanks. I think Holden was going to jump in with a question here.
So, Dan, as an entrepreneur, how or what was the craziest situation you've been in, whether that be like with the drone out in the field or like in the office working?
Well, some of the craziest situations came from my previous company, but I guess I won't talk about those. In this one, there's a bunch of them, but one of the things that always ends up repeating itself is when you're dealing with trying to keep things in the air. Gravity is never your friend, and gravity always wins, no matter what you do. And we've had a lot of really fun times, with the drones and having things not go as we expected them to go to. And of course, these things, especially the prototypes, when things crash, they tend to break and they get pretty expensive. So you never really want them to crash. But the other thing, and this is the other one, is safety, right? When you're dealing with things that fly, especially with spinning propellers, you always want to make them safe. And so when you're doing the initial testings on those things, sometimes in the R&D, like by the time it gets to the field and you put it in the customer's hands, it's going to be really vetted. But while you're doing R&D, sometimes there's bugs or there's mistakes, and that's where things get fun. I remember once, one of my employees had was testing like a drone takeoff, and the compass in the drone had failed and was actually pointing in exactly the wrong direction. So it said north was south and south was north. And so when he took off and expected this thing to fly away from him, it made a beeline straight towards him, and he had to dive out of the way, and it ended up crashing into his van. And we have the first person video on the drone of that actually happening. So you kind of see this thing take off and make a beeline for people and dive out of the way and then smash. And it was just, like stuff like that is just, it's kind of funny, but it's like, whew. Don't really ever want to see that happen again. So, well, there we go. So how do we do the checklist and make sure that the compass is working the way it's supposed to work, and stuff like that. So you learn these lessons along the way, but yeah, those types of near misses are always the ones that are the most harrowing.
I thought you just said earlier the drones weren't going to attack us.
That's right. Yeah, maybe somebody on the team was had a grudge against the person operating it or something, and just did it on purpose. Who knows?
So I know in our conversations, Dan, you've had lots of all kinds of interesting stories from some of your past experiences. I'd be interested to hear one of those on the podcast today, if you want to share.
Well, let me think of some of them. Well, one of them was One of them was in my previous world in the financial industry. So we ended up the way it works is that you have to have like a partner bank and a partner sort of payment processor that does all the financial clearing. It's boring stuff, and I won't go too far into those details. But basically, in order to process a financial transaction, you need one of these partners, or else you just can't process the credit card payment. And so we had ended up doing we ended up on the day of the release of our product, we did a press release, and this has been what we've been working towards, and we were signing up like like the social network style of accounts. We were doing like 500 accounts a day, right? It was just like looking like it was going to take off like a rocket and turn into this hugely scalable business. And like we were so excited about it, and you just dream of that type of traction. And then like 24 hours later, I get a phone call, and and it's like, okay, it's from the payment processor, and they're like, yeah, so they were a Canadian company, but they were their parent company was in the UK, and their payment processor phoned us up and is just like, yeah, we just got notice from our parent company that they're shutting down Canadian operations, so effective immediately, we're out of business. And we had just released the product the day before. So we're like, we've got these thousands of accounts who have signed up, and all of a sudden, just like the next day, we can't process any payments, and we're like, oh my gosh, like what do we do about this? So we had to like put our tail between our legs and go back to all these like customers who got all excited and signed up and be like, just kidding, we actually can't like service you right now, and then turn the faucets off. And it's just like these are scenarios you really never want to be part of, but you learn your lessons and you get your bloody noses along the way, and so that's just one of the many problems I've had to deal with along the way.
Yeah, that's an awesome story. I mean, I think a lot of times as entrepreneurs, we all fall into these situations, and I'm sure at the time there wasn't probably a lot of joking and laughing going on about it, right? You probably felt like the sky was and the world was ending. But
yeah, no, it was about the worst case scenario in a lot of ways. Actually, it's just because it's not like switching to another credit card processing provider is not something you do in 24 hours, right? Like it takes months to do integration. So that's just like what. So yes, it was a major punch in the face. That's for sure.
Yeah, it's always interesting just to hear and know that those type of things happen, and yeah, it's always seems a bit chaotic at the time, but usually the great entrepreneurs learn and grow from those experiences and can have a good joke about them in the future. So yeah, it's been awesome. I think now we're probably kind of getting to near the end of our journey here. We did have some questions from Twitter, so I'm gonna share those in our what we kind of call the lightning round, I think it is, and we're gonna just relay a couple of these questions. So I'm gonna read the first one, and then Holden can ask the second one, and there's about 4 of them here from the internet here. So the first one is from Jeff Gilbert. He's asking, will this system be affordable for small farms to implement?
Yeah, actually more affordable than the other solutions, because like I say, the nice thing about this is that you could actually implement the drone survey as a service. You don't even have to own the asset yourself. I mean, you can, but like drones are a lot cheaper than traditional farm equipment. So that's one of the benefits of the solution is that we actually the Canadian government actually put out a challenge, and that challenge was it was called Scaling Down Precision Agriculture, and what it said is that based on the data, all of the new innovations in agriculture are coming out on like the expensive equipment, or they're just like really pricey. So they're really only affordable or usable by the larger farming operations, and like the smaller farms are kind of being left in the dust. It was something like auto steer was implemented by 61% of farms, and that out of that 61%, like something disproportionate, like 95% were like 5,000 acres or over, right? So it's you've got this part where the rich get richer and the smaller farms continue to struggle with competitiveness, and so they put out this challenge, and they said, are there any companies out there that can bring precision agriculture down to the small farm? And so we put up our hand and said, I think we can. Right, because the drones don't cost a lot, it's definitely within the profit margins of a smaller farm to actually do this. So you can kind of scale this technology and make it accessible to the smaller farms, or you can swarm a whole pile of drones at once and scale it up to the larger farms. And so that's sort of the benefit of using, sort of small, low-cost drones is you can, use one if your farm is small, or use 20 if your farm is gigantic. And, just it sort of depends on how much of an investment you want to make. And again, the second part of it is even if you don't want to make the investment at all, maybe your local agronomist wants to buy a drone and is happy to do it for you as a service, or there's a drone pilot out there, and then you're only paying a per acre fee and then saving that money on chemicals. So so you don't really have any upfront investment except for the survey. So there's lots of different ways it can be made affordable for the smaller farmer.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is one of the exciting things about these types of technologies is it's actually more easily able to fit the different sizes of farms. And there's some things like if you want to buy a big sprayer, you need a certain amount of acres to pay for that, right? And so I think that's going to be really good. And I think we've talked lots about this, but with these type of services, the fee for service may be very attractive. So instead of a farm, or even Aberhart farms maybe initially learning how to fly drones and have drone guys and do all the stuff and figure it all out, well, if we can initially start as a fee for service, and it's a similar cost, or maybe even lower than it would cost us to run a regular conventional ground type sprayer, plus we're saving all this money. I believe there's probably going to be some of these technologies in the future where it will literally be cheaper and way more efficient and way more effective to just have it done as a service. And we can spend more time with our family, more time focusing on the other areas of the business that needs our attention. And so that's one of the things that I love about this is there's no real, the limitations of scale is more of a challenge on the larger end when you're trying to maybe manage, more multiple fleets of drones and those kind of things, right?
That's correct. Yep.
All right, next one, Holden, you still there?
Yep. The second question is from Tyler Wilson. He said, why not go beyond green on green and go straight to robotic manual weed control to eliminate consumer concerns of use of chemicals?
Great question too. I think eventually it'll get to that point. One of the challenges that you have in doing that right now is that mechanical weed control at large farm scales is actually extraordinarily challenging to do from a logistics standpoint. It's just very slow. So if you want your whole farm to be mechanically weeded, it can be done, but it's going to take a lot of time, and it's going to require a lot of machines and a lot of assets, and the costs kind of spiral out of control pretty quickly. So like I say, at some point in the future, I think we'll get there once the machines become cheap enough and fast enough. But it's just too far out to really be something that again can scale. If you've got a really small farming operation, it might be able to work for you. But to scale right now, it's too hard, too expensive. but it will come. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's something that I bring up lots in our discussions, Dan. Right? Like I think in the future we will kind of leapfrog away from chemical, but on the same hand, realistically, it's like saying, well, we're going to produce all the food and grain in the world without any commercial fertilizer, right? And there's still the vast amount of production that goes on. There still is going to be need for chemical for a long time, but I think we can just be incredibly more efficient with that, along with a lot of other inputs. And what I'm excited about is once we start layering all these different pieces of information together, there's so much more insights that can be gained that are kind of complementary. But yeah, it's going to take some time, and that's where we're going eventually. But there's still going to be a lot of chemical use for quite a while, I think. So next question is from the folks at Solios. Do regulations prevent you from using your drone when it is out of your sight?
Currently today, yes. There are companies out there that have gotten beyond line of sight exemptions. And there's a huge amount of regulatory push right now for beyond line of sight type of drone operations, and we believe that based on the progress that's happening in the U.S. with drone deliveries and a lot of the lobbyists and pressure groups that are going on with those types of things, and as well as the supporting technologies to allow that, you are going to see that become more and more commonplace. But is that going to take a year, or is it going to take 5 years? We don't know. But beyond line of sight will eventually become a standard. We just don't know how long it's going to take to get there.
Sure. Okay, we'll go to the last question from the Twitter poll there, Holden.
Yep. So the last question is from David Bade. How small of a plant would be too small for the technology to pick? Might you miss small weeds?
That's a great question, and that's one of the reasons we've invested into this and why it's into the camera systems that we have, and to be able to see sub-millimeter resolution, so we actually can see those weeds, those small weeds. As a matter of fact, we've demoed that for a few partners out at your farm there as well too. The ability, that was exactly their question. They wanted to see it, and we showed it to them, and that's sort of the single part that blew them away the most, is just like, how do you go that fast and see that small weeds at the same time? And we were able to do that, but it's very, very, very challenging. It's not easy to do.
Yeah, it's been interesting to see how accurate it can be. I mean, there's a lot of variables of what I just didn't even realize, but sunlight, is there shading from other weeds? What depth is the seed row? Like all these different variables that can affect the image and the sensing. But yeah, it was interesting to see some of the partners that we were demoing to, just the kind of eyes light up and get big, and when they kind of realize what this technology is currently doing, the state that it's at, and the excitement about the potential of that. So that was really cool to see.
Yeah, it's we're pretty excited about it. There's it's a ways to go yet until we're comfortable sort of putting it on a farm commercially, but the progress that's being made, every month it's getting better and better and better and better, and it's not that far away yet. So it should be here pretty soon, and when it is, like I say, it should be pretty exciting.
Well, that's awesome, Dan. It's been an awesome journey here on the podcast. It's been on my bucket list a bit to get you on since probably a year and a half or 2 years ago, since we started working together. So finally got that ticked off. It's been awesome.
Well, thanks for having me on the show, Terry. It's been exciting. I'm really happy that you had me on here, and I hope it was good for you and for your listeners.
Yeah, it was awesome. Really enjoyed it. Thanks a lot so much, Dan. Love chatting with you about all this stuff. So be sure to check Dan out online, or look up the website Precision AI. You're going to be seeing and hearing more about this little company continuing to grow to a bigger company, and starting to make its mark in the world. And just really excited to share that on the podcast here, and was great to have you on. So thanks a lot for your input here today, Dan.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Terry. Thanks, Holden.
So I'd like to give a shout out to our partners and friends at Replenish Nutrients. Replenish is famous for creating Super KS, Sustain, and Rebuilder. These are regenerative soil health solutions, give farmers an alternative to conventional products, with the side benefit of improving soil quality for the long haul. Fall weather is a good time to apply phos and potassium to your soil. Check them out at replenishnutrients.com. Today's episode is brought to you by GFL Agriculture, formerly known as Biocycle Solutions. For more than 10 years, they have been turning leftover food into valuable fertility solutions for farmers. Bringing organics full circle by returning to the soil as nutrition is given way for growers to feed their crops that they need, using a sustainable, environmentally efficient model. To learn more, visit gflenvironment.com. So gflenv.com.